Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of M365 Voice. My name is Sarah Hazy.
And I am Mike Madarani.
And I'm Antonio Maya.
And I am just very thrilled to have one of my besties on the planet, Michelle Gilbert, who's also brilliant Microsoft architect, speaker extraordinaire, all things Copilot. Michelle, hello, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction. Happy to be here. I follow your show, and so super excited to be a guest.
Yeah, we are thrilled. We are thrilled to have you. And I know that we all have known one another for years, but I want to give you an opportunity, Michelle, to maybe share a little bit about who you are, what you do now, and a little bit about your story from a Microsoft perspective, because you have an interesting career that you have spanned doing a lot of different types of roles.
All right. Yeah, I can go ahead and just let everybody know I've been in Microsoft Technologies for 20 plus years, whether that was administering SharePoint in MOS days to being a global admin during the digital transformation to the cloud. Moved over and went through a few industries, but moved to Microsoft about 5 years ago now. And I started as a Teams technical specialist. I think when everybody was thinking about how you're going to work virtually, I was hopefully had a big impact for people and helping them learn how to use Teams. Then I moved into the customer success role for all things modern work, so SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, and so forth. And over the last year, my focus has been being a principal cloud solution architect with Copilot for M365.
That's fantastic. So I know as part of your role, and we have a whole theme for today's episode, which is part of our Copilot series, but the theme is tied into Michelle's background. We might have had grand plans to bring you a poolside episode with all four of us poolside, but alas, life, rain, precipitation, and schedules are such that only Michelle is bringing us. And Michelle, do you want to introduce your background? Because it follows our theme of jump into Copilot for today's episode.
Yeah, this is behind me is my indoor pool, and that's where I do a lot of my best thinking around Copilot and helping customers. So yeah, today's theme, jumping into Copilot. Yep.
There you go. So poolside. So we really wanted to get started by asking you a bunch of questions about, in your experience over the last 14, 15 months, I think, you've been really guiding a lot of customers through the process of trying out Copilot during the preview programs, and now that it's launched, helping them come up to speed with how they want to look at this Copilot implementation. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Because I bet it's been a really interesting ride.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about fast and furious, really developing the product alongside early access program customers who are like the large enterprise customers realize the value of that. And at that time, you could purchase 300 seats. And so I worked with what we had were 3 waves of customers in the early access program, understand the product, realize the value of the product through many workshops from the beginning of, what's the technical readiness that you have to do to be prepared for it, to the art of the possible and really understanding the features within each of the products, and then doing scenario discovery. So understanding, the art of prompt engineering and what scenarios are going to help with which type of personas within your organization.
I was pausing, Antonio or Mike, I'll keep going.
Yeah, well, I was looking at Antonio. I was going to jump, and Antonio's thinking I'm going to give him a
chance. You go ahead.
I'm
thinking. I've got a million questions, but you go ahead.
So you've gone through like you said, the history of like the early adopters, the preview into the GA. You probably have gone quite a bit of experience with different type of clients and how you've approached selling or adopting Copilot. Can you give us like an overview of like different takes from different clients that you can share in a summary? What is it that a lot of clients look for?
Sure. Right from the early program, and this was, began in about August of last year, so August of 2023, when some of these enterprise customers decided to invest in AI, understand a little bit more about Copilot for M365, figure out the scenarios that they wanted to put inside of their organization, their environment. I was not on the selling side, I was on the post-purchase. So I worked with those enterprise customers in understanding the architecture, understanding what the orchestration model was and is in M365 and inside of the applications themselves. I worked across all industries because at that time, it was and now is becoming a little bit more mature of a product where at Microsoft we're going to have people focused on specific industries, but at that time it was whomever was interested in using the product, I would come in. So whether that was a financial services industry, manufacturing, retail, it really ran across any industry at that point. And to answer like what were some of the experiences, I think at that point they were all trying to understand what is and what will be the value of this within their company. And they took many different approaches, Mike. They went all the way from we're just going to implement it, we're just going to turn the lights on, to a very slow rollout of a very thoughtful approach. I also have had some customers that have rolled out where they just rolled out to their C-suite and to their senior leaders, and they let it go from that point, and for them to find the value and then roll it out to other cohorts. So it's been really across the board the way people have rolled it out. I'll tell you now, there's a lot of lessons learned in those experiences with customers. I think one of the most important things that we've learned is that you can't roll out any new technology. And this goes probably the history of technology without really incredible change management. And this is organizational change management. This is, I think, what I've found to be the success of AI at organizations is really seeing that value is you need change management because it's a user-centric tool, right? This is a really different way that we are going to be working. So hopefully that helped answer your question. It's a lot probably to take away from there. So feel free to ask some follow-ups.
Oh, I will.
So Michelle, maybe one follow-up, and you've talked about this a little bit already, but maybe it's worth diving in a little bit better or a little bit more. I mean, earlier you talked about how when Copilot was first released, it was for 300 licenses at a time.
Yeah.
And our organization purchased 300 licenses, and I was part of our internal pilot. And a lot of organizations did purchase that 300 licenses, ran a pilot on it. Microsoft has since opened it up to any number of licenses. What have you seen in terms of a little more tactically organizations moving from the 300-person pilot to broader rollout? I get the notion of change management, but how do they make that transition, or what have you seen in terms of making that transition from the 300-person pilot to a much more broader rollout across an org?
Yeah, we I think have seen it very similar to other teams rollouts. Yeah, you usually start off with a pilot, right? You may buy 300. That doesn't mean you're deploying 300. You have first off your IT crew, right? Your program management teams, some of your champion programs, or maybe they're the power users, whatever you want to call it. Those are usually the first cohorts, and I think then now you're going into the business, and you're getting into the business, it starts broadening out. So from initially the 300. I usually see the next cohort being about the 1,000 range because they've already developed their training model. And so now it's just scaling it. So I think the answer to you is they've gone from the 300. Now they're broadening, opening up to other departments, and they're using what they've already done in the first pilot groups and just maximizing that in a scale model.
Okay. Okay. And then the other thing you touched on was around change management, and completely agree with you on the importance of it.
Yeah.
About a year ago, not quite a year ago, you and I had a conversation on Copilot a little bit. And I think I remember hearing you say, it wasn't just to me, but that there was a bit of a gap in terms of change management material or guidance available.
Right.
I'm wondering, and I know Microsoft has done some around this. Where has Microsoft come to now with change management guidance that's available? Can you perhaps talk about what has Microsoft provided to help organizations through that very important change management process?
Yeah, and you are correct. When we had that conversation, we did not really have anything. This was, to me, the first product that I've experienced with Microsoft where engineering moved faster than marketing, which seems incredible.
It was crazy.
It was. And my team, I work in the corporate side of Copilot team, and we created a lot of our own material collectively as our group and globally. And then marketing caught up. When it was about coming to GA last November, a lot of really great guidance was out. However, we still needed more. We were still being asked for the prompts, do's and don'ts, and a playbook, and where can we get all of that, and a success kit, and all those sort of things. So where you can find that now is on adoption.microsoft.com/copilot. That has an enormous amount of material. It's almost to the other side now, where we didn't have enough. Now we have so much, and I think it's hard for companies to sift through all that material and figure out what to use. And I would suggest first look at developing governance, developing an AI council, which we do have a really great playbook for that. I think that's one of the first things you're going to want to do. But we do have it categorized in there. Like if you're a user, here's a lot of great material. If you're a leader, here's a lot of the trends, the Gartner reports, and developing AI council. And then you've got the technical enablement. So that's also really important for folks that are looking at technical readiness. Their role is maybe an admin, or they're in security, and what are the things and best practices that you need to look at. So there's one house. That's what I'm happy to say here. There's one house for all that material, but it is a lot. So we try to really put together that material by persona, what your role is in your company.
Great.
And Copilot just touches on so many areas. And many of us, if you've been in the Microsoft space, as we have been, we kind of have lived through several iterations of this recommendation engine, or the early, small pieces that really now Copilot brings that up so much more relevantly and can help you with so much more content generation. But I know something that a lot of companies are looking at, Michelle, is not falling into the concern areas from a security perspective around Delve. Delve being a product where it would recommend files to you. We all know if you're dealing with Microsoft products, you are going to have things that are going to be over permissioned, meaning overly generous permissions, where people who maybe shouldn't have access to something do, but if they never know or it never gets surfaced to them, then it's like a tree falling in the woods and nobody's near it. Does it really fall, and does anyone care? But if Copilot pulls in data from that file or surfaces that file, suddenly the situation is now altered. What do you hear companies talking about in terms of, I know that there's guidance from Microsoft on what to do to get ready for Copilot, but I see a lot of companies jumping in first and not going through all of those efforts, and they're going to be on a collision course with having some really tough security conversations.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and I do have these conversations quite a bit, is how do you get prepared for Copilot? And my question always back is, well, how did you get prepared for search? Because it does use the same search architecture. You're now actually having that result in a different endpoint. And so, I hope that also lessens that anxiety to know that the way that you've already permissioned SharePoint, you've already permissioned your M365 groups, is what it will adhere to. So it's security trim, the way search is. And so the result that you get back is very similar to the search result using that same architecture, like I mentioned, but it's never too late to do governance. So if you feel like, yeah, I'm not very confident about the way search is, that delve, that really heightened the awareness that maybe we didn't have our permission in place, and maybe there was a level of risk acceptance with security through obscurity.
Right.
All that's coming to a forefront right now. So you're absolutely right. I don't think it's the high anxiety. I think it's the, yeah, we really need to take care of it. We really need to go back and do our due diligence. I wish we would have done it from the start. We didn't. Things move fast. Maybe admin roles changed, resources changed. We all know about SharePoint site sprawl, group site sprawl. If you don't have retention or expiration policies, all the content can be so overwhelming. So you're absolutely right, Sarah. I think there's a lot you can do now. There's probably a few things just immediately, which is starting to look at how many sites do you have? You can run reports on the number of sites, especially running reports. We have a new product called SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM, where you can purchase that. You can then start to run reports and say, give me a list of all the reports that use that permission model, everyone except external. And we all know that permission, if we've been in M365 or SharePoint for a long time, that's that, hey, I don't know who is going to need this, so I'm going to set that permission model, and now everyone has it. So I think it's a re-education on what is permission. It's a re-education on site training, on team owner training, but also just setting up the things in the back end, because it's hard to stay current with all that information. What can I just automatically have help protect me? And that's all information governance, right? That's all your enterprise mobility security features that you have in Purview or in Entra that you can start setting up.
So I'm going to dig into a bit more into the information governance. And you've talked to us about your experience going from 0 to 300, let's say 300, 1,000, eventually 5,000, maybe that's organizations. I'm assuming you go that in stages, taking the information governance as your base as well, in terms of, yes, we have done those reports. We know that there is some security and permissions that we need to fix. What determines the next wave? I'm assuming that is also driven by the right information protection we have there, the right governance, the right permissions, so we don't open it up to the next wave without doing that proper governance. So that is a really crucial way to kind of pick who is the next in line, I think.
Yeah, well, I think a pilot doesn't prevent you from still searching or returning results that may be still based on poor permission. So I don't know if I would say you would do it in the next cohort. I think you would do it in parallel. The way that in the approach Microsoft has been guiding customers is the technical readiness and the change management really need to be in parallel. So if you want to get going, start doing these things. Start getting ready for the change on the people side, but on the technical and security side. So that's reviewing it. It's understanding your own company's security posture, and I guess I would call almost acceptance to risk, because I really see that as probably three different ways, right? You have some companies that I know that they will completely allow communication and collaboration wide open. You can create a team. If you need a team, you can create a SharePoint site. If you need a SharePoint site, that's a really, open way. That's the model that Microsoft uses. And I'll come back to that in a second. Then you've got kind of the middle model, which is a balance, right? A balance of, we do have some controls. We need to have control, but we also need to lock things down and make sure that there's usability within the product. And then I know some industries, I've even worked in some industries and they very much have to have things locked down. You cannot create a team. You cannot create SharePoint. We're going to put a lot of control over the usability, which is really hard because that's the risk of your shadow IT. So going back to the first point, you still have control. But what you have is you have the products controlled by lifecycle management. You have them controlled by sensitivity labels and data loss prevention. So you have those things that already are in place. So your security team, your legal team, your records retention, they're all feeling really comfortable because what they put in place is already protecting that information. And I do want to say there's an incredible video out there from the M365 community conference that happened in Orlando. That was, how did Microsoft roll out Copilot, and how did our IT group do that? The speaker is David Johnson, and if you want to learn what a large scale deployment in a very, very short amount of time, but with the right controls that you need to have in place for your SharePoint, your OneDrive, any of the policies you need to have, that is an incredible video. They just launched that on YouTube within the last couple of weeks. That tells, a story of the balance of being able to allow communication collaboration openly, but the control of security needs in order to make sure you have a lot of governance in place.
That is actually a really good video. I have watched that one, Michelle.
Yeah.
To your point about accepting risk, completely agree with you. Most of the organizations that we work with, they know they've been sitting on a mountain of risk of permissions that are not well managed for years and years, a decade in many cases, with on-prem SharePoint coming to SharePoint Online and then just continuing the same habits around that. So very much the controls that you're talking about around dealing with content that's out of date, that's stale, dealing with rot, eliminating some of that, cleaning up permissions, getting visibility on permissions with whether it's through SharePoint Advanced Management or Microsoft Graph Data Connect or third-party tools, getting some visibility over it on where they have oversharing, dealing with that, understanding their risk, understanding how much risk they're willing to accept, and doing that. Like, I just want to reiterate a point you made, a really good point. Doing that in parallel to rolling out Copilot, I believe, is important, because I've seen some organizations evaluate this and then decide, no, we got to clean this up before we roll this thing out. And cleaning it, all of that up in large organizations takes years.
Yes.
So very good points you raise around that. And especially I liked your point about achieving a balance between controls and security and productivity.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's really easy to lock everything down and make everyone super unproductive and not get the benefit out of all these tools you've invested in. And achieving that balance. I thought that video you mentioned spoke really well to that, actually.
Yeah, that's it's a Microsoft story. David Johnson, he's a leader of our own internal IT, and learning how we roll it out, I think, can help set the controls that we as the product, developer, and adhere to, so many workers' councils globally, how we were able to do it, and to be able to get it through legal, have that approval, but bring them along. There's some really great also, how did we adopt and how are we adopting here at Microsoft? Same thing. We've got Claire, Sasan, other stories in our in blog posts out there that tell how we did it from this direction and this direction. I think if you're looking at Copilot, I think those are the places that you look to see how we did it. Because I think bringing your legal team and having them be one of the first people that you assign a license to, I mean, that's incredibly critical, right? You need all your stakeholders to participate, understand what the product is, and then realize that value in order to and gain acceptance to roll it out even broader.
I'm even going to suggest that from a culture perspective, I think it's important that companies know obviously the environment that they're in, the industry that they're in, the regulatory requirements that they might or might not have, but also the culture of their organization. Do they have a culture? And I've worked for companies where if you can get it launched, governance can catch up later. The company is just like, launch it first, govern it later. And that's kind of their IT model. but I've worked for other companies where being a product steward is about first safeguarding the fact that you can launch everything. Keeping it alive is the hard part. And if you launch it and then you have to pull it back due to security or compliance concerns, the hurdle to get over to launch it again is almost impossible to climb. So I think it's really important, and I've worked at companies at both ends of that spectrum. So important to think about the company that you work for and make sure that you take an appropriate plan, because it's a risk-based approach no matter what. You don't want to move so slowly that you let this technology pass you by. But you also don't want to move so quickly that you put the technology at risk. So it really is that art of figuring that out within your organization.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Maybe go ahead.
I was going to switch gear a little bit into the adoption of Copilot within the organizations in your experience. What we're seeing today, or in my experience, that the adoption is a lot different than it was before with previous technologies. I take example, for example, SharePoint. SharePoint was very popular, still popular, but we have to push SharePoint. We have to put the people to have that adoption towards SharePoint in a lot of cases. It's the opposite now, where people are hearing about this AI buzzword, about this Copilot, and they really want to have Copilot, especially when they think or they hear it's happening in an organization, or maybe it's piloted, and they really want to jump on it and start using it. So just curious to see if you have similar experience in all your deployments.
Yeah, I absolutely have. I have gone from one extreme to the other. And I'll tell you that some organizations, they want to get AI ready, but they don't maybe have the change resources or the change management teams. I have found actually quite a few organizations got rid of their PMO teams during the pandemic, and I that was disheartening. Because now they have to prove a case as to why they need to bring, change management or program management back into their company. And those have been a lot of the laggards, to be honest, of having some sort of model, because they're relying on their IT department not only to keep the lights on, manage the M365 services, but then to roll out and train on generative AI. Very difficult task, especially with smaller teams. Even in large enterprises, there's still small IT teams. So I've seen that side. And then I've seen the other side, which is an investment in change management, organizational change management, product and product management, and in program management. When I see that, I get really excited, because I know that that organization is set up for success.
Right.
They have all of their training ready. They have metrics. They have success criteria. They have their comms down. Now, if you don't have that, and there's a lot that are in between both of those, again, out on the adoption.microsoft.com /Copilot site, there is a success kit. There are email templates that you can leverage. You can add in your own branding. You can make your own. So we're trying to fill that gap where there is none at an organization. I think that's great. I think that's the resources that you want to look at. But Mike, it has been across the board.
Okay.
But the most successful is definitely the ones who come in and say, here are our scenarios that we're going after. So, there's some companies I've worked with that were at the 9th month, because in the EAP, it was a 12-month investment at the 9th month, and they're now talking about scenarios. So some are coming, the more successful ones, they have it in hand. They know what they want to go after, but they also have all of the stakeholders in place, and they're ready to move into their deployment.
Okay.
Michelle, maybe to switch gears once again, I wanted to ask you, how do you personally use Copilot in your day-to-day? And do you have a favorite prompt?
Oh, that's a great question. I use Copilot throughout the day. I would say it's the my assistant that helps me get going in the morning. And it's funny because all my colleagues were like, what did you use today? Because we're all trying to figure,
cool.
you know, like which one is the best one to use. My latest favorite is being able to pipe things into columns, because what I find is that I can have it summarize my emails. So I'm kind of, I'm going into a little bit more of like the 300, 400 level of what I do. That's a little bit, probably not as known, but it's, summarizing your email and your teams. And I have it focus on if it's a customer I'm gonna work with that day. I have it focus on that customer, any activity that we've had in the last week. I also say, look at all the communications, and are there any action items I missed? And if so, what are they? And I use Copilot to help me a lot with the things that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I missed that. And I have it go into meetings and what were the action items. So I really utilize it to pipe out information to me, much like you would say, with SQL, you go select all and you put it in these columns. I very much use Copilot to do that for me.
So how do you pipe that to columns?
Yeah.
I love that idea. What do you do?
So you ask it to put your data in a table.
Okay.
And you actually use the pipe. So you can say action item pipe, follow up pipe. You don't use the word pipe,
No,
but it's
the bar.
The bar. Yeah. So you put it in a table and then just put your column headers just like that. And then you can say, and then I like to, much like with my email, I use all unread emails as a really hot pink. It just drives my attention. So I do that with Teams as well. I'm like, or with Copilot when I'm using the Teams app, making the font bold, and if it's at mention, change it to this. So make it really relevant for me. I definitely have personalized it a lot more than what I did in the beginning.
I got to
Very
try
interesting.
that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
cool.
amazing. I love that. I know that Michelle, I think that we should have you back because I know that we could go for another super long episode, but I feel like that is an excellent point to wrap up on.
All right.
So I want to thank you so much for coming, Michelle, and for being a part of the podcast. And we would love to have you back to talk about Copilot. And the focus next time is for me to actually be poolside.
That'd be great
with you.
Let's do it. It was awesome.
Yes.
Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone. See you on the next episode.
Okay. Bye.